Hey,
All
Miko.
right, happy Tuesday. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you on this Tuesday?
I am well.
We're
So,
back for another episode of Mindful Techie Tuesday.
yes. And so
And
I'm
we,
excited to,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I'm excited to be able to turn the tables a little bit this week. So, last week we had a guest host, which was an awesome conversation. And so this week, um, we have um, a guest who's not a guest. He's been a part of every episode, but I've decided to shine the light and to point the mic toward Carlos, who's going to be joining us this week. And so, how are you feeling about being in the hot seat this week, Carlos?
I didn't think I was going to be as nervous as I am, having been, working together collaboratively here on these episodes in the past. But once the light shines on you, I guess things are a little bit different. So excited for our today's conversation. So thanks again. I'm glad we opened season two with you sort of being the guest with a guest host, and as you said, right, like now it's my turn, I guess.
Yes. So, I'll give you an opportunity to tell folks a little bit about who you are, but and as you do that, I want to just let folks know about why you're here in the hot seat today. So we're going to be talking about tools and tactics for hosting virtual meetings and virtual events. And for folks that have been part of previous conversations, you know that Carlos has been in the background as the digital engineer and the digital producer. And since we are in the current state of the world, we are homeschooling, we're working from home. One of the things that has really come to the fore is all the things that it actually takes to produce a high quality meeting, a high quality event. And it's not just a matter of signing up for Zoom and getting everyone on the same Zoom account, right? So there's a lot more that goes into it than that. And so I'm excited to have Carlos here with us today to talk a little bit about that. So as we get started, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing in the background when people see you on the other episodes.
Yeah, so thank you, Miko, for that intro. My name is Carlos Gonzalez. I've spent a great deal of my career working in the nonprofit social service sector, really looking at how we can identify a way to bridge technology with the work of service delivery, to whether it's low income, under served, underrepresented sort of populations. The last 10 years of my career, I've spent working in the homelessness arena, if you will, working in the state of California to end homelessness through either street outreach, shelter. Build out, as well as apartment permanent housing build outs. And then over the past couple of years, sort of found this opportunity to take on, the use of technology, software development, really bringing these tools into the fold of the work that our staff is doing on a regular basis. And super excited to be able to sort of like offer that as a service to our staff. And then by extension, being able to have conversations with industry leaders that are looking to kind of do the same thing, with a little more intentionality behind it. So I spent the last couple of years working in that capacity, and in that we've identified, right, like this amazing sort of opportunity to pivot in a virtual way to continue providing service delivery, whether it's direct service, or conversations like the ones that you and I have been having here, or, in 2020, as well as like the production and hosting of like virtual events such as summits or expos, fireside chats, things like that, that we're all used to participating in on a in-person basis. And now, due to the given climate, we're adjusting to it. And so really excited to be able to like identify ways that collaboratively we can do this.
All right, awesome. Well, so we appreciate you in the work that you're doing. So as we dive deeper, I know that there's a lot happening in the world right now. So before we dive a little bit deeper into the work that you do and some of the more technical tactics and tools, Can you just tell us, how you're doing in the current environment? We have, COVID obviously happening in the backdrop. We have, the presidential election happening, Black Lives Matter, protests across the globe. Can you tell us how you are managing, and how have you had to pivot in light of everything that's happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like most everybody, I would imagine, just kind of like trying to feel our way or my way through like the situation. There's a lot being thrown at us at once, and
Hmm.
so we were chatting earlier. Today was the first day of school or back to school for my two daughters, and so
Hmm.
having to dedicate a little more intentional attention for this, at least these next 2 weeks, to ensure that that transition back into school, although it's still virtually, goes as seamless as possible. Especially as we kind of let them take the summer off, if you will, from
Hmm.
tech and from yeah. So it's really like helping assimilate back to this normality, um and coupling that on top of just the idea that my wife is working from home remotely herself. I've got a schedule where I too am working remotely. So now we've got four individuals online basically at the same time in many instances, right? And so how do we balance that with family time and again, sort of helping ourselves stay true to who we are given our surroundings, right? These social movements and like civil unrest due to the stuff that's happening in the Black Lives Matter sort of arena, if you will. These injustices that we're seeing up in Wisconsin, right? Like that's just all of this is like coming to a fold
Hmm.
or to a head for all of us, and so you know find it like it's an opportunity to lead, I think. But in order for us to be able to successfully lead, we must sort of be able to take a step back and understand what's happening, or attempt to understand what's happening, and put our best effort forward. So yeah, it's been really trying just to process alone, right? And so
Hmm.
I've been grateful to you and the guests that we've had on the show, for the different suggestions or recommendations to addressing just really 2020 with a higher level of mindfulness. And so, yeah, really thankful for these conversations.
Well, awesome. Well, and we certainly appreciate all that you have contributed and in the forefront and in the background to the conversation. And really excited for today's conversation. Now that we've talked about sort of where you are, and the fact that the biggest pivot, it sounds like, for you is that you're doing most of this remotely now. And you're doing this while you're simultaneously navigating, like you said, as an individual and as a family, trying to figure out what's happening in the world. How do you make your contribution to advancing, good in light of what's happening, and then how do you balance the work that you're doing remotely with the fact that you're supporting your wife and your children as well, as they are doing their respective jobs, or in the case of your daughters, homeschooling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think this is a good segue to maybe talk about the in the work that you do. So um, can you maybe describe like like what's your title, um, and what does that entail? Maybe just start with the basics.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely have a full-time like job as a chief innovations officer, again, it's for a nonprofit organization.
Mhm.
I've been working with them for, geez, going on 11 years this coming December. In my capacity there, really looks at covering, like anything that has to do with our information technology, software development, and application development, as well as looking at how we can streamline our office work environment, if you will.
Hmm.
A good sort of like learning moment for me. I spent the last year and a half or so overhauling over 20 of our facilities across the state of California, from a typical office workspace and opening it up to mimic that of the WeWork co-working environments. And so right as we were able to sort of feel like we were finished with these projects at the end of 2019, early 2020, COVID happens in March, and so now we're at being asked kind of to go back and do the opposite, that we to undo essentially what we just did. So here's an opportunity to reevaluate what that means for the workplace, and I think we were able to, with the team, we were able to successfully help our staff adjust to embracing technologies, video conferencing tools, to build that in as part of their regular Monday through Friday or 7 days a week sort of workflow, because we
Hmm.
had already sort of started down that path. And so, March hit, and it forced everybody to make that change right away. I feel we were lucky to have our team already working towards that, and that just made it so much easier for myself, for my teams, and really as opened up an opportunity to, in many instances, consult with other business groups, with other leaders, to share some of that knowledge and some of that experience to get us where we are now.
Okay. And so, in addition to that, you support shows like the one that we're on right now. And so, can you tell us a bit about like your role and how you would describe your role in making productions like this happen?
Yeah, and so in addition to that, I mean, I think what I've found is that there's an opportunity here where voices need to be shared, experiences need to be shared, and I've have the opportunity and really honor to be exposed to some of these tools and partner up with individuals such as yourself, Miko, and other sort of um, shows, if you will, or content delivery mechanisms to come alongside and sort of say, hey, like, we can do this. You've got an audience. There's an audience out there that needs to listen to what you have to share,
Hmm.
needs to sort of like grow alongside with whatever it is that's being built. And so let's team up to help deliver that content in a way that makes it easy for people to consume. And then we can start sort of talking about, then maybe we dive into this a little further, right? But some of the my approaches to this is really looking at how we can position you know, perhaps like a product, let's say a brand of some sort that is customizable and looks different than what we have become accustomed to in this virtual reality space. A lot of folks are used to Zoom. We've got, I've mentioned my daughter is going back to school today, right? Like, they're holding these classes in a Zoom meeting, and so those work for their specific use case. But there are many different tools out there and many different approaches out there that we can consider to really make sure that we're delivering a customized experience to people.
Okay. And so, I actually want to dive deeper into that, um, into the different options and the fact that not everything is a quote unquote Zoom meeting. So, I want to talk about that also in the context of Zoom exhaustion or really virtual exhaustion. Um, but I really want to break down for folks that may not be familiar. So we call you a digital producer or a digital engineer, and the idea being that for a type of um, conversation or broadcast like what we're having right now, uh, while it's probably feasible for someone who's tech savvy to do the interviewing and facilitate a conversation and at the same time manage the behind the scenes, it probably works more smoothly if you actually have someone else doing that, right? So it's sort of like with a TV show or a radio show, we wouldn't expect that, like, you wouldn't expect Oprah to also be like
Right.
simultaneously like interviewing the person or facilitating the group conversation and also managing things from the control room.
Right. Right.
And I think that there's like a parallel though. So can you maybe describe in this virtual context, what is it that you're actually doing? Because people can actually see what you're doing. So what is it that you're actually doing, and how does that actually make things move smoother for the event or the meeting or the conversation that you might be hosting?
Yeah, happy to share about that. I mean, you're right in that. I mean, technology is so awesome that it's made it easy for a tech savvy individual with some level of experience under their belt to be able to manage, let's say, a show like this on their own,
Hmm.
as you were describing. But and again, it's really solely based on the fact that technology is amazing in that way.
Hmm.
But to your point, right, like there is a need to have somebody support that technology and the way it's delivered to
Hmm.
individuals so that you as a host potentially can focus on your guest and listen intentionally to what the guest is sharing to try and identify ways where you can expand on the dialogue
Hmm.
and again bring additional sort of experience to the audience. And so part of what I focus on as this like virtual producer is really again leaning on technology to be able to have this dialogue and connect people across the country or across the world essentially through the tools of technology while being on the background and bringing in solo takes onto the camera or onto what individuals are seeing at their phones or at their desks, bringing in on screen sort of like what we call overlays or texts, designing a virtual set that fits the brand or the personality of the company, the individuals, whatever the case might be. And then in many instances, finding myself engaging and interacting with the audience as well, and sort of trying to see if there are questions or thoughts that they would like to share in a conversation that makes it a little bit more, again, engaging
Hmm.
and continue sort of again growing the reach. We know that in many instances we're going. I mean, as an example, this show that we do, we go live to LinkedIn, so that's a platform that's traditionally known for the connections, the networking with folks in the professional world, let's say. But similar to that, there's YouTube, there's Facebook, and the ideal situation is that we're able to engage with those viewers in a way that this conversation can continue carrying forward beyond a set of like run a show questions that most shows really should have, to kind of again sort of make it a robust dialogue. And so that's kind of the role that I find myself playing in many instances.
Hmm.
um, and just over this past summer I've been able to like expand on that and really bring in like strategy and tools to how we're using like this idea of virtual expos or a summit and bringing multiple guests onto the screens, holding simultaneous sessions if sessions are needed. So there's a lot that can be done in this world and in terms of the work that we're doing. And so happy to share more. I think we've got other sort of thoughts or questions around this.
Okay, so awesome. So I think that's super helpful. So I'm wondering if maybe we could do a a walkthrough of this virtual studio,
For sure.
and then maybe pivot to talk about some of the different tools. So I imagine that some of the folks watching might have aspirations to host something like what we're hosting right now, but I think most folks are probably, the use case for them is probably going to be hosting a meeting or a conference or an expo, as you would say. So I do want to pivot to that, but maybe just to show people the range of things. Um, can you describe what's happening right now? So right now we are, if you're watching this live, or if you're watching the recording of what we're doing live, what you're actually seeing is a live feed that is being connected and pushed out through LinkedIn Live, right? And so can you describe how that's able to happen and then maybe walk us through the virtual studio?
Yeah, for sure. So we're using for today's show and in our series that we've done, we lean on the technology. It's really a live streaming platform or tool by the name of StreamYard. What I can do is I can share that link in the comments here shortly. And what it does is really a web-based platform that allows us to create a unique URL that then we send out to our guests on a scheduled basis. And so, what this means is that this lets anybody with that link be able to come into the virtual studio from be it their phone, their tablet, a computer, some kind of browser. We pick up on their on whether it's their onboard camera, an onboard speaker, or something like I have a slightly different setup where I have like an external DSLR and I have this external microphone, and so you're able to build upon maybe some of the tools that folks already have. So we create this virtual set where people can come into it, and then what we've done, and I'll be playing around in here a little bit as I speak through to this, right? Like we've created this background that I'm now removing, right? So this background here is something that we've customized for this particular show.
Hmm.
We've created an opportunity to brand it with the Mindful Techie logo, right?
Hmm.
So without it, we're back to sort of like that Zoom experience.
Hmm.
And so this has allowed us to again bring just a little bit more customization to the work that we're doing. If you tuned in earlier, we played in a 2-minute countdown timer, which is a video file that we preload. And then that just allows us to do some show prep before we click start, before we're actually live.
Hmm.
And as well as calling in the audience to come into the show.
Okay,
If we
awesome.
wanted to, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say, so uh, what about the additional information? Yeah, I was going to ask you about like the lower thirds and the title bars. Do you want to talk about that? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And then we can, like, as you probably saw on screen here, we're able to bring in individual names to the customized to the brand. So we're able to identify the themes that we want to show on screen for the particular shows that we're working on. And then we've got a few like pre-created banners in here. So this is a scroll text.
Mm.
This could be customized to whatever we want it to say down here, essentially, but it'll just loop on here.
Mhm.
We've created additional banners that will highlight the work that mindfultechie.com is doing, and so here's the website on screen. We highlighted last week the planner, right? So here's another sort of
Mhm.
showing or display of that. So yeah, this is the setup, and then another thing that we can highlight here is just different views that the audience can look at, right? So right now we have this what I call this side by side wide view.
Mhm.
But if we wanted to switch it up, we can do a side by side close up view, which brings us closer to the screen, to people's screen.
Mhm.
Or we can do a solo take, and I'll keep talking, but I'll zoom in on you, Miko. Um, right. So this is the solo view, and what's interesting is that then this makes the conversation a little more dynamic because we can go from that tight solo view shot to this open one, come back potentially to the guest, back to you, and sort of back in this way, and sort of kind of go through this cycle of what the production could potentially look like,
Yes.
as well as we haven't had it so much on this show, but right, like if there was a need to do a PowerPoint deck or a presentation of some sort, the
Mhm.
tool that we're using will let us do that as well. So to your point, right, like these summits or these virtual events, so many times presenters are looking to present information or content, and so we're able to do that through this platform.
So, a technical question. I'm not sure if you have a sample slide that you're able to bring up where you can show that, but if you're able to, I'll give you time to maybe find something.
Thank
But
you.
so, in terms of the slide deck, there's also some dynamic things we can do with that. And I'm wondering, is StreamYard one of those platforms where you're able to bring the speaker to the foreground and the background? So in other words, generally with Zoom, if someone is sharing a screen or sharing slides, the slides are sort of the predominant thing, and then the person becomes smaller. Is there a way to reverse that with StreamYard or other tools to make make it sort of like you're watching a newscast almost, where like the person who's talking is the central point, and the slide set that they're maybe working on or that they're presenting from or talking from is the sort of the secondary item?
Yeah, for sure. And I was trying to pull this, so pardon me for like a little bit of
No, all
distraction, but
good.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you can totally do that. Hopefully this slide itself shows on. It's so interesting. I was watching. I'm not sure if you've had the opportunity to see. Is it? I think it's like John Oliver's Last Week Tonight or something like that on HBO.
Mm. I haven't
Um,
seen it since he's been doing it in the pandemic, but
Yeah,
yes, I'm familiar with.
he's doing it in his garage somewhere.
Hmm.
And so, but seeing what he's got going on there, I was like, wow, like we can totally do that same replicate essentially his same show to this platform. So here's like just a quick example of this is a Google slide show. So
Hmm.
it's been able to, with this, we're able to show the presentation itself. You and I are on the right hand side here. But if we wanted to show this, so we can show this full screen, or
Hmm.
we can show it like this.
Hmm.
So one of the, let's see, how do we just let's show it like this. Where did it go? Typically, I'm a little more on it since I'm not worried about being on screen. But this is a
Yes.
good take to your point, right? Like where you have the presenter that's a little larger, so you can still have that interaction with that person,
Yes.
and then you see the content that they're sharing. In many instances, for presenters, really the whatever's being shown on screen shouldn't detract or take away from whatever they're presenting. So these are really should be just talking points in many instances. So if
Hmm.
it's taking up the majority of the screen, it takes away from them and their presentation.
Yes.
So anyway, I one of the suggestions that I make for like these virtual events is trying to help presenters come to that realization, right? Like you
Yes.
don't want to put like too much content on a PowerPoint slide because then that overwhelms the audience and it takes away from whatever they're saying.
Yes. And so I think it's a great point. Um, so in terms of tools, so we talk about StreamYard, and StreamYard can broadcast to LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, any other platforms you're aware of that StreamYard is able to broadcast to?
Yeah, for sure. So the three you mentioned, Periscope, which is a Twitter-based platform,
Hmm.
as well as Twitch. Traditionally, Twitch has been known for in the gaming world,
Sure.
and but there's a lot more and more content being created that's not gaming related, and really, it's companies trying to position their products for the gamers.
Hmm.
So it could be like soft drink related stuff. It could be movies. So there's a lot of a big push in the industry for that as a platform.
Sure.
And then the so that's five options. And the potential sixth option really is going live straight to like your website. So we can embed a video player on somebody's website, and the same content can go there. Um, in
Hmm.
addition to, and in many instances, we can go to these platforms at the same time. So we're able to capture the respective audiences at those platforms. Really, the only one at this point that isn't open to using a third party tool for their live platform is Instagram Live.
Yes.
They've been a little more stingy to allow third party tools. And again, they're trying to make use of their own interface. So
Yes.
they haven't quite opened up their APIs for that.
So that being said, though, you know, whichever platform you're streaming to, you're able to get access to the file, right? Once it's done recording, and then you can edit that file and you can repurpose it for whatever purposes, right? So like for this conversation series, I, you edit it, I take the file and I upload it to IGTV. So even though we can't stream it live to Instagram, we can upload the file so people can actually view it on Instagram later. We can strip the audio and send it off to a podcast host and have it live as a podcast file.
Yeah, totally. So to your point, right? Like the earlier talking point was specific to that live experience. But we are able to, once we click end broadcast, we're able to download a recording, of that conversation in video format and audio format. And so now here comes where like marketing strategy comes into play, and repurposing of content is really beneficial to brands, to companies, to businesses, where you can now take either the full recording, put it on IGTV as we do with this particular show, but also even like taking a step further and sort of saying, you know what, there was a segment in there where you spent the past 3-5 minutes perhaps like really sharing a ton of golden nuggets, right? So let's pull that out and let's see how we can repurpose that to our audience, right? Whether it could be LinkedIn, right, where you're saying something that's specific to professionals that you really want them to see, and then we can add a link that says, "Here's the full recording at IGTV," right, or here's this to download whatever it is that you may need to download. And you and I are now starting to talk about like how do we use the audio for this potentially to do a spin-off podcast attempt at the same conversations, just making it easier for people to stay up to date, whether they're in their car driving or they're working out or they just happen to have their headphones in and want to have a listen in.
Yes.
We can do that through this platform.
Excellent. And so one final question on StreamYard. So how, if at all, does this integrate with Zoom? So for example, I imagine, particularly for facilitators, speakers, presenters, that there might be interest in, for example, using the different views that you show with the slides and the presenter in different locations. Is that something that you could use StreamYard for? Are there other tools for that?
There are definitely it's a mixed answer. So one thing that I had not shared just yet on this particular StreamYard tool is we're able to bring in up to 10 people on the show at once, right? So kind of replicating that gallery view in Zoom that we're used to. We're able to do that through this web browser. I think the difference that I would say between Zoom and StreamYard is StreamYard's intent is to go out to some sort of social media channel and have an audience engage in those platforms. Where Zoom, because it's a virtual meeting platform, lets you bring in the people that you want speaking, your panelists or your presenters. And then on top of that, you're able to bring in an audience within the Zoom ecosystem to view that presentation. So that's the difference between Zoom and StreamYard, where again, StreamYard is really looking for an outlet, a social media outlet, and so that's where that experience is a little bit different. Obviously, Zoom has recently enabled their ability to go live as well through Zoom as a platform. So they, again, are trying to cater to those folks looking to go to like a YouTube or a Facebook and have enabled those features within their paid subscriptions. I'm feeling like I might have missed that second portion of the question.
No, so it's just really well, part of it was about Zoom, so I think you answered that question. But the other part was about the dynamic ways in which you're able to have the presenter and the slides or whatever content on the screen show up. Does StreamYard connect to Zoom in a way that allows you to do that, or are there other tools that you can use to do that? If you had thoughts about that.
Yeah, so there's StreamYard right now does not allow for this like multiple views to be brought into Zoom. There's a technology out there where you're able to convert a video signal into what is known as a virtual camera. So in theory, StreamYard would enable this capability to send what we're all seeing, which is this fully produced aspect, and convert that into a virtual camera that then we can select as a quote unquote camera in Zoom to deliver that produced version. So StreamYard right now doesn't do that, but I use an alternate tool that does that very effectively, and that's by the name of like Ecamm Live.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm happy to share that link as well. And Ecamm Live is an Apple-based product, so it works on Macs essentially. That will allow us to do a similar production as this. I actually recently just produced a fast pitch event for a local Los Angeles-based nonprofit, and we used Ecamm Live to deliver that produced content to a Zoom platform.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to. And what was awesome about that is that we were able to bring in an overlay API through Pledgeling. Pledgeling is a fundraising platform. So what that let the company do is basically show on screen real time how much they were fundraising as they were making that call to action.
Mm-hmm.
And what was exciting is that they were able to raise nearly $150,000 from that particular live event.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're attributing a lot of that to the content that was engaging, and to just anytime you're putting something on the screen as a call to action to people, right? Like that is just another opportunity to further market and deliver what you're hoping to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so we were able to do that. We were able to do that through this other tool, as mentioned, Ecamm Live. And there's other, and that one has a bit of a cost to it. There's others out there, such as like OBS Studio. That's a free open source product.
Mm-hmm.
And that lets you convert, again, your production into a virtual camera, and
Mm-hmm.
then Zoom receives it as an actual camera.
Okay.
Very technical. I'm sorry for all these like
No,
technicals.
this is all good. So people, either if they're tech savvy, can look it up, or they can give it to their tech team, and the tech team can
Have
can
them
figure it
figure
out.
it out.
So what? Let's talk about security. So I know that security is a big thing. You know that you know Zoom bombing, for example, has that became a I guess it became more prominent as more people started to use Zoom, um, when things initially started to shut down as a result of the pandemic. And I know that Zoom has, in their particular case, um, they've addressed this in two ways. One is they're going to start requiring passwords and/or folks enabling a waiting room, which is essentially like a virtual waiting room where people have to sit, and you have to
Yeah.
they have to sit until they're actually invited to come into the room or into the meeting. Um, so speaking broader than just Zoom, whatever platform people are using, can you maybe talk through at a really high level, like what are the maybe top two or three things people should be doing, be mindful of in terms of security for their meetings and their events, regardless of which platform they're using?
Yeah, I mean, definitely ensuring that you're opening up that link or that instance in which you're going to hold a meeting or an expo or whatever you might be looking to do, putting that through like a registration form or platform. So Zoom does a great job at letting folks like create a form of some sort to have folks pre-register.
Sure.
Um, you can do Eventbrite as an example to kind of help do that as well.
Hmm.
There are some other sort of pluses to doing that approach in terms of having people register, and I can speak to that in a bit. But really is looking at creating unique links and unique ways for people to access the content. Um, and in many instances, I mean, even with those attempts, I know Zoom, for an instance, right, you mentioned Zoom bombing was really took the long end of the stick here, or the short end of the stick, sorry, in that they were blamed for all these Zoom bombings because it was ultimately their platform, and it was raised that their platform was not secure enough. But the reality is that it was always secure, and really the changes that Zoom did the weeks following this big scandal was only highlight where people needed to go to click to ensure that those meetings were secure. But that
Yes,
functionality was already there.
and
Uh,
and just to clarify, so for folks that are wondering what we're just to clarify further what we're talking about, we're talking about Zoom bombing, where essentially someone who's not invited shows up and they show up with the intent of disrupting the meeting, right? So either the examples of might be that someone is playing a song, for example, that is disruptive or offensive or in some way disrupting whoever is presenting the meeting, or people are, if they have the ability of sharing their screen and sharing perhaps images or videos that probably aren't appropriate. And so what we're talking about is how you, just if you were having a meeting in person, generally there's a check-in where like you register, you get your badge, and like, oh, Carlos, you're here. You, yes, you are a speaker. We invited you. Here's your packet. They check your ID. They confirm that you are the person, and then you go into the room, and all is well. And so what we're talking about here is how do you build those virtual checkpoints to make sure that the people who you've invited are actually people that you actually want to be there. Um, so I was going to actually add to your point about registration.
yeah.
One of the things to consider too is like, um, you know, this is perhaps um, pretty simple to do, or maybe simpler to do if you have a paid event, right? Because people have to actually pay, and so the barrier to entry is that much higher because you have to shell out some money to actually participate in the event, right?
Sure.
So presumably you don't get the link or the password or whatever you need in order to access the meeting until you've actually paid and you've registered for the event. But you want to say more about other ways that people can address this first barrier in terms of making sure the right people are in the room?
Yeah, it's the I mean, I think that's really the best thing to do is attempt at forcing everybody through some level of registration. Um and then in that, the as a follow-up to that is not reusing the if it is a like a URL that's generated by whatever platform you're using, not reusing that link for future meetings. So if you're having like a recurring instance, um, whether it's like a back-to-back like summit with multiple days, or just a regular meeting or conversation like this, right? Like we do these weekly shows and we have a new URL in each instance, and we're really only providing that URL to our guests, because we know that we're directing traffic to our viewers in a different sort of platform, such as LinkedIn. Um, the reality is, whatever security mechanisms one takes, um, it's just as easy if somebody really is intending to disrupt the conversation or a conversation, they would be able to forward that same URL. What I like about the StreamYard platform is that as I serve as the virtual producer, I'm able to see who's coming on to this URL link.
So that's like the waiting
Um,
room, right? So like I think StreamYard calls it the backstage, right? It says that you're backstage, and whoever the, in your case Carlos would be the producer. The producer can see you, and they'll let you in when they're ready for you.
Yep. And
Yeah.
and then without that, that person cannot come on the screen and be disruptive. The same now is, and so basically what Zoom ended up doing is they ended up calling attention to where these functions were at previously, so
Hmm.
that your regular, perhaps inexperienced user knows where to find them, right? So now you're able to create a lobby and admit people as you would like. You can force people to have their cameras off, and only have them on upon your own request if you're the host of those Zoom meetings. And so, again, because Zoom is so friendly and familiar to people, I like to sort of share that as knowledge to individuals that you could create in your admin settings a template of like what features you want to have enabled for your guests and for your speakers, and do that. One, create those sort of safeguards, let ensure that your speakers know of the safeguards in there that you've enabled them, and then have somebody on the team, and you can do like a host and a co-host, multiple co-hosts within Zoom, and so now you can distribute kind of the workload and allow people to manage. Somebody can manage the chat or the comments, somebody can manage letting people in and out, turning people cameras on and off and whatnot. um,
And
so
these are
there
things that
yeah.
you can do across, like the functionality looks differently across platforms, but we're using Zoom as a reference. But the idea is that any high quality platform that's intended to host an event with dozens of people, allow people to present, etc., is going to have some type of functionality that mirrors this. Is that the idea?
That's the idea. I mean, I've mentioned some of the like summer activities or events that I've helped produce. These are events that have attracted like 500 plus individuals in many instances, and it's really like looking to deliver the experience of an in-person summit or expo, but in a virtual setting, right? And so in that environment, then we're able to create and designate like separate stages, separate sessions. And then for each one of those sessions, we can assign who the speaker is to that session. So that person's the only person that's authorized to have their camera turned on to present their screen. And typically, what I like doing is holding these like pre-event conversations to get people coached into this new experience, and then have a day of troubleshooting for those instances where we need to troubleshoot, and we always need to troubleshoot.
Yeah, and so I think this is critically important. So for if you're having a staff meeting, you probably don't need to do what you're talking about, right? But if you're hosting an event where you have dozens or hundreds or thousands of people that are going to be coming virtually, you're going to have speakers from all over, and you're going to have breakout rooms at different stages, like what you described. Definitely having an event walkthrough, the same that you would do for an in-person event. So I do speaking and training all over, and for in-person events, generally, it's the day it's the day before
Mhm.
or at some point before the event,
Right.
with the event planner, with the AV team. You're walking through, okay, this is the mic we're going to use here, the slides, just test the slides, just test the music. Here's where you're going to stand, here's what the lighting is going to look like. You're doing all those things so that when you show up, you know things run seamlessly. So you want to be able to do that for yourself as the host, but also for your team, for your speakers, um, that are going to be coming. So this raises a question for me as we begin to wrap up this conversation. um, can you talk about audience engagement? Right, so audience engagement, um, I think it's one of the areas where lots of folks are challenged.
Hmm.
We've walked through over the course of this conversation how we can make the experience dynamic from the standpoint of the user who's taking in the experience, and capturing and keeping their attention. But how do you actually make it more of a two-way conversation or a one-to-many conversation? You have a speaker or facilitator for one of these expos or one of these meetings that you're talking about. What are some creative ways that people can engage, whether they're using Zoom or StreamYard or whatever they're using?
Yeah, the suggestions that I typically make is really welcoming the audience from the onset, right? So you're welcoming everybody back to the show, reminding folks about the platform or the agenda, as we've become accustomed to. Use that opening instance as an opportunity to engage and encourage comment and questions to the host, the panelists, whatever the case might be. Um, From that, then you want to have a couple of reminders that say, if we were to break it down into quarters, that says, let's just assume we're playing basketball or whatnot, right? Like you would go into the second quarter and the third quarter as an instance where you can type into the chat to people and say, hey, here's what's coming up next. Here's a great opportunity, bring in the questions. And then always build in on the back end of the conversation, build in some time to one, remind the audience that here's a perfect opportunity for you to send in your comments or your questions. And perhaps even leave. I'm actually helping a colleague in the Silicon Valley just coordinate some of his conversations. And what has made his particular show unique, it's Es Tiempo, which is Spanish for it's time, Es Tiempo with Frank. And what he has done for his particular show is he has designated 30 minutes for the, let's get to know who you are as a guest, as a leader. Let's talk to you in this 30-minute instance, and then sort of saying, you know what, the remaining 30 minutes, we're just going to open it up to the audience, and we're going to ask them to ask you some questions or clarifying comments based on the conversation that was had. So again, really being pointed about that engagement, and then using again these tools or these technologies where we, here's a comment from Cherie that we can potentially bring on screen and sort of say, she's agreeing with Raquel earlier. Yes, it is. Thanks. And just that simple acknowledgement of like, here's somebody that's watching us.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take the time to acknowledge the fact that they've commented, they've asked a question. We can take them back off screen. That is really empowering to the audience to just know that it's not just you and I talking, right? And that we can give them a shout out, if you will.
So, what about things like polling and
Yes.
other ways that you're actually able to, in addition to the chat, you're able to get real time feedback and engagement from the audience?
Yeah, super important to have polling. And it
Word
doesn't have to
clouds.
be, it doesn't have to be like an extensive, like 5 or 6 like polling questionnaire. If you got two or three like nicely thought out poll questions that you can put out there, and really with some intent behind it, like what are you hoping to achieve with putting these questions out there for people? Not just you as the person that's taking the poll, but also then what will the audience receive by participating in this poll, right? So maybe it is a follow-up. And so going back to the registration, tying this all back together, right? Like if you performed a front end registration process through Zoom or through Eventbrite or through any of the tools that let you do that, now you can take these polling questions and you can follow back up to the audience and sort of say, those that registered, and say, here are the results of the polls. Here's a copy of the content that we shared. Here's a copy of the audio. Here's a copy of the video. Like using that as an opportunity to continue building this contact list that will, again, further drive the growth of whatever work we're doing.
All right, awesome. Well, this has been great, and I feel like we have to have a follow up conversation already. And I know that you were afraid that you weren't going to have enough to share.
I know, and I apologize. I know there were some instances where I was rambling, but yeah, I mean, I think this is, to me at least, it's very exciting to be able to figure out a way to deliver content and make it so that folks can experience it in a way that's palatable. And so,
Mhm.
again, we're super excited that we're season 2. I just saw the guest list that you sent over for the coming weeks, and excited to like see what these experts and leaders have to share around the work that we're doing. And so can all I can say is to the folks that are viewing this is like, stay tuned, right? Because these conversations are only going to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we might have to, for the part two of this conversation, we might have to do, to your point, some pre polling to see what, because I feel like we just scratched the surface
Mm,
and there's so many different directions that we can go in depending on people's interests and what their,
for
the
sure.
level of entry that they're coming into this conversation from. But as we wrap up, can you Just tell us really briefly, how does someone, if they want to hire you as a digital producer, as a digital engineer for their event, for their show, how do they get in contact with you? How do they learn more?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I should have prepped this beforehand. I'm trying to prep a little banner here. I
And
am going live. So as mentioned, we're going live on LinkedIn. Feel free to send me a message there if you're interested in having a further conversation, or you can send me an email. Here's my email on screen: carlos@cgmediasolution.com. Either way works. Happy to chat. And what we've been doing is we've been doing things as, I mean, just this past Saturday, I got a call. We don't think about these things with COVID, right? Like a girl was her bat mitzvah, which is this like milestone in Jewish culture, was postponed in person because of COVID, right? Like you can't make that celebration, and so what her family resorted to is having a virtual bat mitzvah. And so I was brought in to help basically have them take part in the ceremony, have her relatives come in via Zoom or via video and be part of the ceremony, and then push all of that out to the synagogue's website and their social platform, right? And so like these are things like that are very important and valuable to us on an individual basis, on a business level as well. And
Mhm.
so we basically run the full gamut, and it's all, if we want to like dive into at least further into like understanding what individuals needs are, happy to chat about that, if that time comes.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for what I think is the start of a really robust and exciting conversation about tools and tactics for hosting really good virtual events and meetings. And I hope folks learn that it's not just a matter of getting a Zoom account and sending out the link, that there's a lot more that goes into it. If you really want to stand out, if you really want to engage folks, especially in an era where people are exhausted from Zoom meetings, and you want to make your experience more dynamic, you want to engage folks, and you want to really amp up the level of value that you are providing to folks. So, um, Carlos, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being behind the scenes, and having this conversation with us. And for folks that are out there, love, like, and share this conversation. And I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you, Miko. Have a good day.